Every good Farbrengen has a good l'chaim. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to be learning a whole series of different teachings from Rav Ginsburg on Hanukkah. It's not like 1 hour Torah, just segments, and we'll break it up with a couple of chaims, a couple of songs. So we're going to start with, at the end of Parshat Vayishlach, is the section called the 8 kings of Edom that ruled before there was a king in Israel. Rav Ginsburg said that more than any other section in the Torah, the Arizal invested more time and effort in this relatively small passage than any other passage in the Torah. These are the 8 kings that ruled in Edom before there was a king in Israel, and it's already hinted in the Zohar that this is talking about Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels in Olam HaTohu. And as each king, he ruled and he died. He ruled and he died. And each one of them represents one of the Sfirot that broke in the Shvirat HaKelim, which paved the way for this world, which is called Olam HaTikun. So the Ari, along with many, many, many secrets that he revealed, he mentions that the 8 nights of Hanukkah are a tikkun for these 8 kings that ruled. 7 of them are mentioned that ruled and died. And the 8th king, Hadar, he ruled, but it doesn't say he died. And the difference with this king is it mentions also his wife, Mehetabel. So, as we're going to see, based on the Rabbi's teachings about from Chof Chet Nisan, when he said to all the Hasidim that I've done everything I can to bring Mashiach, and the rest is for you to accomplish. So, of course, in Chabad, this was like an earthquake. But then he said, I can tell you that the secret to bring Mashiach is to put Orot de Tohu beKelim de Tikkun. That the way to bring Mashiach is to take the awesome, powerful, pure lights of Tohu and put them in vessels in this world, Olam HaTikun. Because there was nothing wrong with the light of Olam HaTohu, it's just that the vessels couldn't hold it. So these 8 kings represent each of the Sfirot breaking, because each one said, Ani Amloch, I will rule. In other words, I don't need any of the other Sfirot. I can handle all the tikkunim we need all by myself. This was called Ana Emloch, I will rule. But they ruled and they died because they couldn't hold the line. But the 8th king is Hadar. And so the 8 lights of Hanukkah is a tikkun. But for the tikkun to happen, so it depends on us. It depends on us being able to see in the physical lights of the lights of Hanukkah, to see an infinite light shining through them. And now we're going to get to more, but right now I just want to concentrate on Hadar. So what's interesting is that Hanukkah, in general, we have an idea called Hidur Mitzvah, to beautify the mitzvot. So we can do this on two levels. We can do it through not doing it by rote, doing with lots of kavanah, and in a more practical, maybe material way, but this is how most people think about it, is that we beautify the mitzvot by getting a beautiful Chanukiah, a beautiful challah cover, a beautiful kiddush cup, beautiful arba minim on Sukkot, whatever the case may be. We beautify the mitzvah in the material world. So what's interesting is that Greece, Yavan, so their whole thing was hidur, was beauty. But of course, theirs was only an outside beauty. So in other words, if you have the most beautiful Chanukiah, but you have no kavanah when you light the candles, then it's maybe an outside type of hidur, but certainly not a complete type of hidur. And so the Greeks, they practically worshipped physical form, physical beauty. And the blessing that Noach gave to Japhet was that they would be connected to beauty, but they would dwell in the tents of Shem. But the problem was in the story of Hanukkah. So Yavan, Greece, they didn't see it that way. They worshipped physicality, beauty, what they called culture, and things that you can't see. The world of spirituality, that was foreign to them. So it's interesting that the eighth king who rules and doesn't die, so he's hinting towards Mashiach. And the key element here is that it's he and his wife. All the other kings, it does not mention their wives. And so the basic idea is that they weren't married, whereas Hadar was married. And so we see this connection that the tikkun for physical beauty in this world is that it should dwell in the tents of Shem. In other words, if it's in the context of beauty, of holiness, then there's nothing wrong with a whole lot of things that are associated with Greece, whether it's sports or exercise or culture or music or museums, whatever it is, whatever we associate, the Western world associates with Greek culture, if it's in a context of holiness. When art is in a context of holiness, the greatest art in the world was the Mishkan, was the temple itself, was a beautiful Chanukiah, a beautiful Kiddush cup, beautiful Shabbos candlesticks. So that's hinted with the name Hadar. Now it's also, Hadar is Gematria 209, which is Ba'or, with light. So of course this is connected to Hanukkah, and it's connected to this idea of taking the lights of Tohu and putting them in Kelim of Tikkun. And that is really what Hanukkah is all about. Hanukkah is we say, B'nai Bina Yemei Shmona, the children of Bina, 8 days. What's the connection with Hanukkah? So Bina, if you start from below, from Malchut, and you work up the Sfirot, the 8th one is Bina. Bina is the 8th Sfira from Malchut. So B'nai Bina Yemei Shmona. Nice rhyme. So the inner light, though, of Bina is simcha, is joy. So if we're lighting the candles, and as soon as we light it, we go and we eat latkes, we play dreidel, we give gifts to the children, which is very nice. But we're told that it's one of the most auspicious times of the year to meditate while watching the Hanukkah lights. Many, many, many stories of the great Rabbis from all the different trends of Chassidut, who would either spend a long time with kavana before they lit, and also not just sitting for half an hour by the lights, but at least a half an hour. That's what we're told, that women are not supposed to work during that half an hour, because it's really given over to really meditate on the lights. And while we're meditating, so we're seeing through. The reason I brought up Bina, because the definition in the Talmud for Bina is lahavin davar betoch davar, to understand one thing inside of another. So here on Hanukkah, we want to see in the physical light that it's the Or Ein Sof that's shining through. What's called the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light. All the Hasidic Sfarim explain that the Or HaGanuz, the light that of the first day of creation, which was hidden away, not taken away, but hidden away, shines through the Hanukkah. Where else does this light shine through? We're told the Torah itself. When we learn Torah b'kavana, and we're putting our total focus into it, we're contacting this primordial hidden light. It's no longer hidden. We reveal it by learning Torah. We're told it's also hidden in Shabbat, in the menorah in the temple, and in the Chanukiah, in the lights of Hanukkah. So it's interesting. One more thing about Hadar, the fact that he's married. So very, very special expression about lighting the lights of Hanukkah, ish ubeito, a person with their house, with their family. That there are many, many family-oriented holidays. In fact, they all are, because we're eating the meals together. But here we're told specifically that, first of all, most of the time we're spending in the Beit Knesset doing the davening. But here, it's ish ubeito, that the hidur mitzvah is to light in one's own house with one's family. So this is all connected to the 8 kings that ruled in Edom. And on Hanukkah, we have a chance, in a sense, to fix Shvirat HaKelim, because we're lighting lights at the darkest time of the year, or the longest nights and the shortest days. In a few days will actually be the winter solstice. So Hanukkah every year is very near the longest nights. And so this represents everything that darkness represents, and in our case, it could be Shvirat HaKelim. And what we want to do is we want a world of rectification. And so as we're speaking here, so literally around the world, Chabad is setting up thousands and thousands and thousands of public Chanukiot and doing public lightings. This is the ultimate in pursuing Nisa. Pursuing Nisa is, it used to be that we lit in our candles, or there were many times in Jewish history that was too dangerous, and we would just light inside because it was actually too dangerous. And now, not only do we light in Eretz Yisrael, especially outside and in our windows, but here Chabad is taking it to a whole different level of pursuing Nisa. So this is the tikkun is to spread light, but we have to make ourselves vessels for that light. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. Okay, let's have a song. Excuse me. Einai ding dang dang dang, Anna ding dang dang, Amba ding dang dang dang, Einai dang dang, Anna ding dang dang dang, Anna ding dang dang dang, ding 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 ding dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang. Ding dang 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 ding 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 dang 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 and then ding dang dang ding dang ding dang ding dang and dang 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 and ding dang 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 and then ding dang 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 ding dang dang ding dang dang ding dang dang ding dang ding dang 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 and then ding dang dang and ding dang 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 and ding dang dang, and ding dang dang dang, and ding dang dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang, I ding dang dang dang, ding dang, I ding dang dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang, I ding dang dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang dang, ding dang dang, I ding dang 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 dang, ding dang ding dang dang dang, and ding dang dang. Ding dang ding dang dang dang, ding dang dang, and ding dang dang dang, and ding dang dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang dang, ding dang ding dang dang dang, and ding dang dang, ding dang ding dang ding dang, and ding dang dang, ding dang ding dang ding dang. Ding dang ding dang 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 ding dang dang ding dang dang ding dang dang ding dang 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 ding dang dang ding dang 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 ding dang 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 ding dang ding dang 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 ding dang 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 ding dang ding dang 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 dang. Welcome all the people who just came on the last few minutes. Okay. On to another perspective of Hanukkah. All of these are coming one way or another through Rav Ginsburg, either through his lectures over the years or through his videos or mostly from his books. So we talk about the light of God all the time. The light of God. The question is, what does that mean actually? What does it mean? We have the concept of Ein Sof, the infinite one, and or Ein Sof, and the light of the infinite one. So from our perspective, that's what we have. From our perspective, light and the light of God, the light of spirituality, the light of Torah, is consciousness. It's a certain level of consciousness. The more conscious we are, the more elevated, the more refined our consciousness is. That is what we call getting in contact with the light of Hashem. So that's why the gematria of Or, 207, is the same as Ein Sof, as infinite, the infinite one. So this is one of the secrets of mitzvot in general. If you take the word mitzvah and you look at the four letters of God's name, Yud and He and Vav and He. So the last two letters of God's name and mitzvah are the same, Vav and He. And in the mystical alphabet called Atbash, where you exchange an aleph for a taf, a bet for a shin, meaning the first letter and the last letter, second letter and the second last letter. So the first two letters of mitzvah, the mem and the tzadi, are exchanged for the first two letters of God's name, a yud and a he. So a mitzvah is done in this world. Virtually all the mitzvot are either connected to a physical object, a physical action, or speech. And every mitzvah is very defined. When to do it, how to do it, where to do it. Very, very precise. So at first glance, it appears that the mitzvot are very, very boxed in, very, very limited. But here we saw from this exchange of letters that really the infinite light of God is shining through each mitzvah. So this is a tremendous paradox that a bound-in physical mitzvah done in a particular place, at a particular time, in a particular way, it actually is the gateway to the infinite light of God. So what's interesting is when we think of consciousness, we think of the mind. Now, remember, maybe they still do it, I don't know, but in cartoons, when they want to indicate that someone has an idea. So what do they show? A light bulb kind of like going out from the head. But what's interesting, modern biology has shown what the brain is actually on fire. In other words, thoughts and reactions and the way the whole body works is electric pulses through synapses, and it's like a power station, like an electric power station, the mind. So when we talk about being enlightened and we talk about connecting to the light of God, so biologically there's actually something really there. But on a deeper level, a beautiful, beautiful gematria is that Or Hashem equals exactly Eitz Chaim, the tree of lights, the tree of life. So when we think, when we talk about Gan Eden, and we talk about the tree of life, what exactly is the tree of life? It's a very symbolic metaphor. Like, how do we understand the tree of life? Of course, we call the Torah a tree of life. Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba. For everyone who holds onto it, it is a tree of life. And of course, the Sfirot are called the Eitz Chaim. They actually look a bit like a tree with the trunk in the middle, and the two sides are the branches. But here we have a different, deeper perspective, is the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life, is the revelation of the light of Hashem. Now the Zohar, now of course, all this is connected to kavanot to have when looking at our Hanukkah lights. So the Zohar says about materiality that all matter is nothing other than thickened light. Meaning that what in modern science we will say, all matter is energy. You don't see the energy. You see physical objects. You see the whole world is just made up of physical objects. But what's behind that? It's all energy. And it's all hidden. So it's really the same thing what the Zohar was saying. The Zohar is saying is all materiality is just thickened light. So if we have a ladder here, so we have matter, that's Olam Asiyah. What's behind the matter is energy. What's behind the energy? The light of God. If we ask, what is energy? Energy is a manifestation of the light of God. But we can go even one step deeper. What's behind the light of God? And this is, we say it every morning, Kulam b'chachma asita. You made everything in wisdom. This is, as it were, the thought of God. And this is what modern physics is coming to, is that for those who are in my generation, when we learned physics, back then all there was an atom and an electron, a neutron, and a proton. I mean, that's basically all they knew about. Now, if you go to high school physics, inside the atom, now they know scores of subatomic particles. But what is behind all of that is it's encoded information. That's what science is saying now, that the electron it's a wave function, that atoms and molecules, there's something there, but the deeper you go into quantum physics, it's all becomes encoded wisdom, encoded information, just like the DNA. The DNA is strands of proteins, but what's in those proteins? It's the code of how a human being or any other living being operates. It's the operating manual. But behind that is the thought of God. Kulam b'chachma asita. And what's behind that? What's behind the thought of God? That's what we call atzmut, the essence of God. And that is, hopefully Mashiach will reveal that level. But we know that in the Targum Yerushalmi, so they translate in the beginning as b'chokhmah, with wisdom, that the whole creation is the wisdom of God, which is, as it were, the thought of God. And that thought of God then trickles down, hishtalshalut, into light, into energy, into matter. So when we're looking at the candles of Hanukkah, like it's like a tunnel vision. We're looking at physical light, and yet, remember, B'nai Bina Yemei Shmona. to understand one thing inside another. So in the physical light is a spiritual light, is energy, is the light of God, is the thought and the wisdom of God, and ultimately the essence of God. L'chaim, 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 l'chaim. Okay, let's have another nigun. This is a Hallel nigun. The last one we sang was Rav Ginsburg's, and this one is my nigun. Give me a second. Dun dun ding ding dun dun ding ding dun dun ding 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 dun dun ding ding dun dun ding ding dun dun ding 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 un dun ding ding dun dun ding ding un dun ding 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 dun dun ding ding dun dun ding ding I ding 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 I ding 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 I ding 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 oh un ding 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 I ding 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 oh dun dun ding ding dun dun ding ding dun dun ding 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 dun dun ding ding dun dun ding ding hey ding 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 un dun ding ding dun dun ding ding un dun ding 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 dun dun ding ding dun dun ding ding hey ding 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 I ding 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 I ding 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 oh oh un ding 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 I ding 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 oh oh Pitrulinye Shavarei Tzedek Avo Vavam Odeka Ze Hashar Lashem Savadikinyim Yavuvam Odecha Ki Anitani Vatei Lili Yeshua Odecha Ki Anitani Vatei Lili Yeshua Even Ma'asu Hawa Abonim Haita the Rosh Pina Even Ma'asu Hawa Abonim Haita the Rosh Pina Memeit Hashem Haita Zavar Iniv Labeinu Meit Hashem Haita Zavar Iniv Labeinu Ze Hayom Asa Hashem Nava Vagila V'nismecha Bo Ze Hayom Asa Hashem Nava Vagila V'nismecha Bo I ding 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 I ding 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 oh I ding 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 I ding 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 oh I ding 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 I'm gonna ding 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 I'm gonna ding 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 I'm gonna ding 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 I ding 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 I'm gonna ding 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 I ding 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 I ding 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 oh I'm gonna ding 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 I'm gonna ding 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 Chaim. Okay, now because we're right before Rosh Chodesh Tevet, I want to give over an awesome Torah from Rav Ginsburg. This is an amazing, amazing Torah. Hopefully I'll be able to fit it all in here. So, first of all, I want to mention that there's something highly ironic, paradoxical, that only 8 days after the end of Hanukkah, is the fast of Tevet, the 10th of Tevet. And there's a number of reasons given for the fast day. One is that it's the first of 4 fast days. Actually, chronologically, it's the first for the destruction of the temple. And it's also, according to tradition, when the Greeks forced 70 sages to translate the Torah into Greek. So what's ironic is here we're celebrating Hanukkah and the victory over the Greeks. 8 days after Hanukkah, there's a fast day because the Greeks forced us to translate the Torah into Greek. So, especially if you look at Western civilization. So, on the outside, on the inside, so the Jewish people, whether it's medicine, psychology, physics, biology, politics, economics, education, you name it, of course, not even counting spirituality, law, justice, morals, ethics. So the Jewish people, the influence, when the true history of the world is written, has been just beyond all conception for such a small people. But when you look at the outside of Western culture, Western civilization, it's Greek. The worship of sports, the worship of beauty, of theater, of movies, of physical beauty, sexuality, you name it. There's a big question: who won the war? It's like on the inside we won the war, but when you look at the world, and especially the worst of Western culture. So that's a little bit of a paradox about the juxtaposition of the 10th of Tevet following right after Hanukkah. Okay, that was my insight. Now let's look at what Rav Ginsburg says. So he brings from the Talmud, Avodah Zorah, 8a, anyone who wants to look it up, Avodah Zorah 8a, that it says that after Adam and Chava left the Garden of Eden, they noticed the nights were getting longer and longer. And Adam worried that because of their sin, that, the world was just going to continue until it was just darkness. And he felt it was all because of their sin. And so as they got closer to the solstice, so for 8 days, Adam fasted because he was afraid that this was the end of the world. And then he noticed that it had reached a peak, and the light was starting to come back. So he celebrated for 8 days. And then the following year, he made like a 16-day festival that the world didn't end and the light came back. And it explains in the Talmud that this holiday that Adam initiated, it was with good intention, but once idol worship began to spread in the world, so this original holiday turned into a pagan holiday. And without going into it, but there are many explanations that that's how Christmas and New Year's came right at the same time of these previous pagan holidays. So let's go back to a little bit about the 10th of Tevet, that it's the first of the fast days for the destructions of the temple. It's the beginning of the siege of Yerushalayim at the time of Babylonia. And Rav Ginsburg had an amazing insight that one of the things that we're fasting for is the way he described it. It marked the end of a universal vision. What does he mean? And he quotes from Shlomo Melech's prayer when he dedicated the temple. And it's in the book of Malachim that he said a series of prayers for the Jewish people. And then he said a prayer for the nations of the world, that God should listen to their prayers, and when they come to the temple, that God should listen to their prayers, and that they have a part in the temple. And of course, we know that in Sukkot, we bring 70 sacrifices for the 70 nations. And we're told that when Mashiach comes, all the nations of the world will come up to Yerushalayim to celebrate Sukkot. So if we go a little bit after Shlomo, then we have Yeshayahu and many of the other Nevi'im, who also, in a sense, inaugurated this, what we'll call the universal vision for mankind. And Rav Ginsburg says that at the destruction of the temple, that in a sense that ended that vision. At the time of Shlomo, so the wise people and the kings from the whole world came to Yerushalayim to hear his wisdom. And they came to the Beit HaMikdash. And we know that the third temple will be called a temple of, God says, of Beit Tefillati, my prayer for all peoples. But that was the original vision. The original vision was that the whole world should come up to Yerushalayim. The whole world should worship God, and the whole world was welcome to come to the temple. And so part of the fast day is mourning the end, because once the temple was destroyed and we went into exile, that started a whole different dynamic between the Jewish people and the world in general. Okay, so Rav Ginsburg came up with this idea, and he explains that this idea is not meant to be implemented right now. It's a creative, visionary idea. But I know when I read it, I was just so taken by the vision. So he said like this, that when Mashiach comes, that we, in a sense, we should reinitiate the 16-day holiday. How? We would begin with the 8 days of Hanukkah. But like we said, the 10th of Tevet is exactly 8 days after the end of Hanukkah. So if we would add those 8 days, like everyone asks on the 8th day of Hanukkah, what's now what do we do? How do we carry this light forward? So in a sense, like this is the idea, is we would continue it. And then he adds another amazing thing. Everyone knows that there's a disagreement, a machloket, between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel how to light the candles. So Beit Shammai says we should start with 8 candles, and every night we should take one away until we're left with just one. And he takes as the model how we brought the sacrifices for the 70 nations. That we started with 13 on the first day of Sukkot, and then it was 12, and then 11, and then 10, and we went down. Hillel, of course, Beit Hillel, we know that's the way we light, is we begin with 1, and we add, because we only go up in holiness, we don't go down in holiness. Now, obviously, each one has their logic, their reason, their svara. We chose Beit Hillel, that's how we do it. But there's something to Beit Shammai. So Rav Ginsburg said like this, that in this 16-day holiday, the first 8 days, we would light like Beit Hillel, like we do now. And then, though, when we get to the 8th, then we would start with 8, and we would go down, and we would end with 1 light. Now, this would be the 10th of Tevet. But the 10th of Tevet is a fast day. But the prophets told us that when Mashiach comes, the full redemption comes, so we will, all of the fast days will turn into holidays. And of course, we know, let's say Tisha B'Av. We were told that Mashiach is born. And so the symbol of Mashiach coming, in a sense, is that all the fast days will be turned into holidays. And so the holiday would be the 10th of Tevet. That would be the climactic finale of what began on Hanukkah. Now, again, Rav Ginsburg said that this is not something that people should, in a sense, should start doing in a practical manner. But it's such a beautiful vision, because in a sense, he said this will become it could be, again, creative thinking, it could be a universal holiday, because Edom started it with very good intentions, and the first temple was meant to be for all people, and of course the third temple will be. And Mashiach is coming not just for the Jewish people. He's coming to teach the whole world. He's going to bring peace to the whole world. So I just thought this was just such an amazing, amazing idea. I'll end with one last insight from Rav Ginsburg, is that the lights of Hanukkah, a flame in Hebrew is called shalhevet. It's actually mentioned in Shir Shirim, shalhevet ka. And he said that the gematria of shalhevet equals exactly b'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol me'odecha. With all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, with all your being, with all your kochot. So this is a hint to us about how we should be looking at the lights of Hanukkah. It needs to be with our whole hearts, our whole souls, and our whole might. And in the Chumash, when it talks about Aaron lighting the menorah, so Rashi says about this shalhevet, he says, At shalhevet oleh me'aleha, that the mitzvah of the Kohen Gadol was not just to light the menorah. He had to light it in a way that he was sure that it would continue to be lit. until it went up of its own. It was like it could be on its own now. So that's very similar to something we could learn about the lights of Hanukkah. There's a level of looking at the lights, getting oneg from the lights, feeling spiritual from the lights. But on the deepest level is, will the light continue to shine even when there's no Chanukiah? In other words, is my experience that I'm having during Hanukkah, whether it's when we're saying Hallel or we're looking at the lights, is it changing me? Is there a transformation happening? So I just want to end with a bracha. We'll sing one more song. We have 4 more minutes. And everyone should have so much light. The world needs so much light, especially after these last 8 months. We need so much light. So I just want to bless everyone to feel it on the inside and to have the strength and the wisdom how to shine it into the world, and to take the orot to tohu, and that we become the kelim of tikkun. So let's sing about rebuilding the temple. Yibanei Hamikdash, Yibanei Hamikdash, Yir Tzion Timalei, 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 V'sham nashir shir chadash u'beranana na'aleh, Sham nashir shir chadash u'beranana na'aleh, Yibanei Hamikdash, Yibanei Hamikdash, Yir Tzion Timalei, Yibanei Hamikdash, Yibanei Hamikdash, Yir Tzion Timalei, V'sham nashir shir chadash u'beranana na'aleh, V'sham nashir shir chadash u'beranana na'aleh, Ding 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 Hanukkah Sameach, everyone. Hanukkah Sameach. Thank you for coming. Hopefully see you next month. Everyone take care.